Welcome to the 4Cs podcast for SAP Business One, brought to you by Third Wave Business Systems. I'm Mike Ham, and my colleague Tyson McMurrin, bringing you a podcast that takes a deeper dive into the ERP system that is SAP Business One. We'll be hosting product experts and members of the Business One community, helping you, a Business One user, get the most out of SAP Business One. Hello and welcome back to episode 13. We're going to be talking about the fourth C, control, and in respect of change. Let's start off with a quote by Benjamin Franklin. Change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will determine your success in life. Tyson, when I read this, the first thing that comes to mind is the SMEs that we work with and their ability to change and adapt to all of the things, internal and external, that they face. Talk to me more about what jumped out to you.
Yeah, Mike, change within the SME space is certainly something that is constantly there because you're on this growth trajectory, and within that growth trajectory, there's just constantly either, the addition of customers, addition of products, the addition of acquisitions, whether that's, vertical or buying out competitors, just this constant change within the organization, constant change within, processes, constant change within the organizational structure. As companies reach certain sizes, staffing levels change, or the organizational dynamics sometimes change as well. But, I think of the pandemic that we just are, still in, Mike, and just the amount of change that the SMEs have had to face, from all the employees not being able to work in the office, supply chain pinching, the customers ordering online and the shift to a lot more e-commerce. The pandemic has allowed a lot of organizations to, change the way that they communicate. Look at how many people use Zoom and Teams now compared to, before the pandemic, and just that adapting to change. We've seen a lot of our clients coming through the backside of the pandemic here in a much better position than they were when they started the pandemic, only because they really had, the wherewithal to kind of adapt to that change, and really kind of, address it. Some of our customers have acquired suppliers. Some of them have acquired competitors through this pandemic. And, the pandemic's probably, what we would call a big change. It's an external force that's created a lot of change downstream. But, when I think of change, Mike, I think of it, within kind of three areas. One being this external change. So, customers' buying habits changing, a supplier changing the way that they do business, a customer changing the way that they do business, a pandemic. External forces are always going to be, making an organization assess, how does this affect our organization? But you also have the internal side of things, like increasing staff leaving, just the dynamics of processes, wanting to change those processes. And then you have the third area, Mike, being like systems and processes. So functionality within an e-commerce product that's now available, functionality within SAP Business One that allows you to kind of change the way that you do things. You also have, just process change, such as, using using a UPS integration, those types of things are change, and identifying where that change is coming from, I think will certainly help an organization, kind of adapt to that change and ensure their success.
Yeah, I think you said, the most important thing right there at the end was identifying the change, right? We all know that the SMEs, their main advantage over a larger company, and this was reflected tenfold in the pandemic, was their agility, their ability to adapt to change quickly, right? We saw a number of SMEs that we know and work with change over a product line to making masks, right? So we know that change is incredibly important, but what you talked about, you identified the changes and called them out. You spoke about internal, external, and then processes of change. So you put it in 3 buckets, and that helps you understand what change you're facing. If they're all coming at you at once from all different angles, it can be overwhelming. But I think the best businesses and best SMEs are the ones who have that innate ability to understand where that area of change is coming from and identify it as such. That allows you to take it on a lot better, right? You look at these changes in buckets and understand them better, where they're coming from. You can apply these techniques over and over again. I think that's incredibly important, is to understand what kind of change is taking place, because that's going to position you for how you're going to adapt to that.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. There's adapting to the change, but there's also, it's really important to make sure that adaptation is not creating like tangents in process, because like you were talking about, you go from making a certain product to making PPE, or you go from shipping pallets of goods to distributors or to clients to sell in retail, to doing drop ship orders for your customer. If your processes didn't adapt along with the adaptation to meeting the customer request, or addressing that change, all you've done is you've just created a whole bunch of downstream headaches, operationally, organizationally, and this is where your staff are going to start to feel increased stress. You're going to have a lot more risk within your organization because these processes haven't really been fully thought through sometimes. Yep. Because it's this adapting quickly, right? So these are good points that we just talked about, where we're adapting to the change, but are we really looking at, is this the best way that we can handle this from a process standpoint? And Mike, you and I talk about the 80-20 rule all the time, and I think this is where this is a good way for you to be able to make some changes internally by using the 80-20 rule.
Absolutely. That 80-20 rule goes hand in hand with what we just talked about, and that's the identification of the change. It's going to help you. What it comes down to really initially is what you have to be relentless in is the pursuit of understanding the change and understanding what's going on. And SMEs that are great at that are often just as good at adapting to the change, because they know it. They know what, like you said, what the downstream effects. So the 80-20 rule being, 80% of your headaches are more than likely only caused by 20% of your problems. And the flip side of that is, 80% of your successes or 80% of your sales typically come from 20% of your customers. And you can use both sides of that to your advantage when it comes to understanding that change, in that those 80% of the headaches, what's getting repeated? What can I identify through that? And through the success of the top customers and top performers and top processes that are bringing you tremendous success, what's repeatable throughout the organization? So it's a full understanding of the changes, what you have to do first.
Yeah, so I think, what we just highlighted is, you're going to have these external, internal, or, system or process changes that are always going to be kind of coming at us, and we're going to be adapting to those. But I think, the important thing to do here, Mike, is to really kind of build a habit around,
yes,
don't just slam a new process in to address a change request from, one of your big customers. Really kind of, have an evaluation process where you go through and you really identify, is this process the most efficient way of doing this? Are there other areas where, maybe some functionality in SAP that we haven't used before can help us? Maybe there's some integration points where, we can streamline the process to get rid of data redundancy. Just really kind of looking at all these areas. And what I like to do, Mike, is to really kind of do an internal evaluation and really kind of start with are we easy to do business with?
Yep.
Are any of our employees overwhelmed with certain backlogs in areas? Does our digitization stop at certain points? How do we communicate internally? Is it paper? Is it walking back and forth? Are our processes too complex? Is there only one or two people within the organization that really, understand how a certain process works for a certain customer? Do we trust our information that's in our system? And then who in the organization is really kind of the owner of the process? And further to that, who's evaluating the human processes around this? And can we grow exponentially, with our existing staff and systems with this, process that's in place? And don't feel overwhelmed if the answers to some of these questions are yeah, we are hard to do business with, or yeah, we are overwhelmed, because as this podcast is all about, it's the 4 C's, Mike. And, it's not just about the core system. It's not just about control. It's about, all of it, and really kind of, connecting and communicating, making sure that you're leveraging the core system to its fullest capability. So things like drop ship, for example, are you using the procurement piece that's available within SAP Business One? Are you integrated to your shipping, so that you're not having to go to another system and enter in your client's account number to, create a shipment? Or how are you handling, are you charging for packaging now? Because before you just used to send pallets of items. Have you, all of these processes that might have changed, have you really leveraged all of that? And the good news is that, we're here to kind of help you with that. And we're always giving you, tips and tricks of where to identify, where this is happening and address it. So, don't feel overwhelmed, because, so many times, when you have these changes coming through, we're seeing where a process is put in place in haste. Yep. And then that becomes, the hard process forever. And don't do that. Just make it a habit to really kind of question everything within the process, and how can we improve it? How much is that costing us? to do it. And, no speed bump where, the information is disconnected or, there's a backlog. No speed bump is unimportant. All of them are important to, assess and identify a better way of doing things. And that is really going to kind of really allow you to, thrive with any change that comes at you. So, make it a habit.
Yeah, and there's two things you said that jumped out at me. The first one was the trend really I saw through your line of questioning is question everything, right? And like you said, make it a habit, make it a process, put it down. And so everyone in the organization is on the same page where we're looking at things analytically now. We're looking at things through design thinking. There's techniques you can deploy to better question your own processes, and nothing's too small, right? Nothing, like you said, with putting in a change in haste. Don't do that for a number of reasons. The first being the total cost of ownership, and this goes all the way back to what we initially stated, is understanding the change. When you fully understand the change, you're fully understanding the total cost of ownership of what that quick fix is really going to cost you. It's going to cost you, it's going to become one of those, 20% of the processes that's going to cost 80% of the headaches. And what you need to do is have a long-term vision when it comes to change. You need to have the thinking that we're going to sacrifice in the short term here because it's going to better position us in the long term when it comes to these changes. But when we are not understanding a change fully, we're not understanding, what are its downstream effects? What's the total cost of this change? When we're not questioning it because we don't have a process in place, that's when we make a change in haste. That's when we see only Joe or Jane knows that process, right? And that's how we get burned later on, as opposed to stopping, understanding a change, questioning it, putting that habit into place, and then making that short-term sacrifice by doing the research, consulting with folks like us, asking other Business One customers out there, how have you done this? Have you run into this change? Because I guarantee you, you are not the first person to be making this mistake, and you are not going to be the last. And there's someone out there who's probably doing it better than you. So why not take the time to find that, right?
Mike, you're completely right about this. And so many times we see when, a client will get a hold of us and go, I want to do a shipping integration, or I want to do an e-commerce integration, or I want to implement a credit card module, and we'll start asking questions around other areas. And it's like peeling an onion. Like, there's just so many areas that the client's like, oh yeah, we haven't addressed that. Oh yeah, I didn't know that you could do it that way.
Yes.
So, don't feel like, you're failing as an organization because you have all these like shortcomings. And it's okay if you have a big list of inefficient processes. And that's why identifying the cost and using an 80-20 rule becomes a really good strategy for you to kind of identify the processes that, are kind of like the cream rising to the top, where it's like,
Yep.
if we address this, as once you address that, there's going to be something else, right?
Exactly.
But all too often it becomes this overwhelming thing where if you try to rechange everything all at once, versus like continuous change, it becomes overwhelming because it's like, oh, well, yeah, we don't want to do the integration yet because of da-da, right?
How many times do you see that? We get to the doorstep of the integration process and then the person goes, oh, well, yeah, this is great. The solution's perfect. Can't wait to go with it in 6 months to a year because, well, we have to change this, and this first. It's like, well, understand those changes, understand those first. Is that necessary? What's going to make the impact?
Exactly, Mike. And the big ones that we're seeing right now out there is, integration to e-commerce, integration to credit card, integration to shipping, and allocation of inventory. So, if that's the cream that's rising to the top, we have a lot of experience around that. Reach out to us, we can help you with it.
Absolutely. And just want to hammer home is the habit. Form this habit, form the ability to question and the ability to fully understand a change as you make it. Understand the downstream effects and understand also that you're not the only one making these mistakes. You're not the only one that is facing this change. There's someone else out there who's done it. There's someone else out there who can help. And don't be afraid to ask those questions and to fully pull those threads. And we're here to help you with any step of the way.
Absolutely.
So Tyson and listeners, want to thank you as always for joining us. Really appreciate you, and please reach out with any change questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Take care and stay connected.